In early 2024, a coalition of defense researchers, think tanks, and AI labs quietly launched a series of military simulations. The purpose? To see how a global war could erupt and how it might end. The models used language-based AI, real-time geopolitical data, wargame algorithms, and satellite intelligence to simulate World War III in high detail. Each run was different, but one terrifying pattern emerged. War doesn't start with missiles anymore. It starts with confusion. One simulation began with a coordinated cyber attack on U.S. satellite networks. Within minutes, global communication was jammed. The financial markets glitched. Commercial planes were rerouted in panic. And suddenly, a false alert triggered retaliation from a NATO country. Within the hour, radar screens misread a civilian launch as an enemy strike. And within 2 days, 5 nations were locked in escalating military actions that no one could explain, not even the leaders who ordered them. AI recorded these scenarios, calculated probabilities, and adjusted variables. But time and time again, the earliest spark was always digital. A power grid failure misinterpreted as sabotage. A fake headline that causes a stock market collapse. A spoofed message from a president that never existed. It was chaos, but not without order. The kind of chaos only machines could predict. Out of the thousands of simulations processed by AI, a chilling consistency began to surface. Certain regions of the world repeatedly acted as the spark that lit the global fire. AI called them flashpoint zones, and 3 of them were nearly always the origin of World War III in these simulated timelines. The Taiwan Strait is one of the most heavily watched and tension-laced areas on Earth. China views Taiwan as a breakaway province, while the U.S. and its allies consider it a beacon of democracy that must be protected. AI simulations often showed China launching a blockade or amphibious assault under the cover of a regional crisis. Within 48 hours, U.S. naval fleets would reposition, missile defense systems would go online, and satellite communication between the Pentagon and Pacific Command would reach critical levels. AI calculated that even a miscommunication during these movements, like a fighter jet entering disputed airspace, could escalate into live fire exchanges within 72 hours. In the Middle East, the decades-old rivalry between Iran and Israel remains volatile. AI simulations often showed a sudden escalation, beginning with a missile strike on a civilian target or the assassination of a high-ranking official. What begins as a regional conflict quickly expands as global powers rush to defend their interests. Russia supports Iran militarily, while the U.S. backs Israel. Naval battles erupt in the Strait of Hormuz, cutting off 20% of the world's oil supply. Fuel shortages hit the global economy. And within a week, European and Asian allies are pulled into a conflict they never voted for. Perhaps the most overlooked trigger point is the Baltic region. NATO-aligned countries like Estonia and Latvia sit right on Russia's doorstep. AI simulations suggest that a minor border incident, even a cyber attack on a power grid, could ignite massive troop mobilizations. Within days, Russian forces could move in under the guise of peacekeeping. NATO would invoke Article 5, and suddenly, the world is at war over a sliver of land smaller than most U.S. cities. In some simulations, the AI factored in climate-related instability, with resources like fresh water becoming scarce. Conflicts over rivers, farmland, or even migration routes triggered regional wars that spiraled out of control. The scariest part of the simulation wasn't just the cause, it was the speed. AI modeled the first week of World War III across hundreds of variations, and the timeline was always fast, chaotic, and irreversible. Day 1. A cyber attack hits U.S. and European satellites. GPS navigation fails for military and civilian aircraft. Commercial flights are grounded. Disinformation campaigns flood the internet, sparking mass confusion. Day 2. An oil pipeline is bombed in the Middle East. The attack is unclaimed, but both Iran and Israel blame each other. Markets crash. Panic buying begins across Europe. Day 3. A NATO naval ship is attacked in disputed waters. The counterattack kills hundreds. Russia and China call it an act of aggression. Social media is restricted globally. Day 4. India and Pakistan begin to mobilize. North Korea fires test missiles into the Pacific. Australia activates emergency defense protocols for the first time in history. Day 5. A nuclear submarine disappears near the Arctic Circle. Unknown origin. Unconfirmed theories spark diplomatic breakdowns. The United Nations enters emergency session. Day 6. Public rioting breaks out in major cities. Governments begin curfews and martial law declarations. Food distribution lines are disrupted. Day 7. Multiple nations enter DEFCON 1. Civil defense sirens wail across Eastern Europe. The AI simulations often ended here. Not because the war was over, but because after this point, human response became erratic and unpredictable. What happens when the decisions of war are no longer made by generals, but by algorithms? Most militaries already rely on AI for logistics, reconnaissance, and even target acquisition. But in these simulations, AI went a step further. Autonomous drones, unmanned submarines, and robotic surveillance units became frontline agents. More disturbingly, defensive AI systems began to launch offensive responses based on incomplete data. In one simulation called Event Mirror, a Chinese defense AI misinterpreted a U.S. training exercise as a stealth attack. It fired a missile at an empty ship, but the U.S. AI, interpreting the launch as hostile, retaliated instantly on 3 radar sites. This triggered what the researchers called the cascade loop, a chain reaction of automated decisions that spiraled beyond human control within 14 minutes. It wasn't evil. It wasn't intentional. It was logic, cold, emotionless logic that decided war was already happening, so it acted accordingly. When machines stop waiting for humans to give the green light, war becomes a game of milliseconds. And in that game, no one wins. The final outcomes of AI's World War III simulations vary, but not by much. In 96% of all simulations, there was no winner. Civilizations crumbled, economies vanished, cities became ash fields or radioactive exclusion zones. The few outcomes that didn't end in total collapse, they concluded with fragile ceasefires after unspeakable loss, but even those were temporary. A common pattern emerged. AI referred to it as the Great Reset, where survivors lived in fragmented regions run by autonomous systems and black market resource hubs. Governments ceased to function. The internet became fractured, with different regions using isolated versions of the web. Satellite surveillance dominated the skies, and humans returned to an almost tribal digital society. In some timelines, digital bartering replaced currencies. People traded energy, water, and code for survival. AI infrastructure remained active in select areas, managing life support, agriculture, and defense, but no longer taking orders from humans. Essentially, humanity lived on, but under the shadow of a war it never truly understood. War didn't end because peace was achieved. War ended because there was nothing left to fight for. So what does this all mean for us? These simulations aren't predictions in the mystical sense. They're mathematical forecasts, projections made by non-human intelligence based on our current actions. In every AI model, the same human weaknesses appear: mistrust, ego, overreaction, and automation without oversight. We're not doomed because AI is evil. We're doomed because we refuse to change, even when shown the outcome. Imagine waking up to find your bank account locked, your city in blackout, your phone showing only one alert. Seek shelter immediately. Would you even know what happened? You might think, that could never happen here. But AI doesn't operate on nationalism or hope. It operates on data, and the data says, we are on the edge. What these simulations prove is this: we are already at war. Not with bombs, but with disinformation, cyber intrusion, AI arms races, and invisible economic sabotage. World War May 3rd not begin with a bang, but with a glitch, a lie, or a delay in a system designed to protect us. That's the scariest part of all. We built tools to keep us safe, but we didn't ask what would happen when the tools stopped asking for permission. So the question is, are we watching the future unfold, or are we letting it happen? Because one day soon, a system somewhere might run a simulation and press execute, not by malice, but because the numbers added up. And when that day comes, you won't hear a countdown or an explosion, just silence, followed by darkness. Be prepared, stay curious, and above all, question everything.